recreational substances should never be regulated by the federal government and absolutely never regulated by the United Nations. What's so bad about getting the federal government out of the business of regulating unpasteurized milk? Now that's a real bad. So why should we be so intimidated? If they want to use the issue of somebody using hard drugs as the reason that we have to give up all our freedom, it's wrong. It's better to defend a position that says you do have freedom of choice in what you do with your body, but you also have to have responsibility for what you do. And if you do harm to yourself, you can't go crawling to the government to penalize your neighbor. This position of the government controlling all those decisions is detrimental to progress in medicine. So often there are alternative treatments for cancer and other diseases that are not approved for years and years and years because we have to have the FDA, which is controlled too often by other drug companies, deciding when and what we can do. We, as individuals making decisions with our own physician, ought to decide about all alternative care as long as people are upfront and tell you the truth and tell you the risk and can't defraud you. So in all that I just explained about personal choices and everything I've done in politics, I've never introduced a bill in Washington, D.C. to emphasize heroin. So they take all of what I said and turn it around and say, he would legalize heroin. And, you know, the plain truth is that heroin, at one time in our history, was legalized, and there was essentially no abuse of it. And it's only in our recent history. And there was a long time in our history that marijuana was legalized. I happen to have a personal, real disgust with the abuse of drugs. But it's all drugs, those that are considered illegal. And I think physicians prescribe way too much medication and get too many people addicted. The line that caught a little bit of attention down in South Carolina was when this came up and they wanted to paint me as this monster about heroin. I didn't get a chance to say, well, I've never mentioned that word. I talk about liberty and freedom, but the interpretation is correct that I do want people to make choices. So in my less than 30 seconds left to make my point, I said, all right, if it would happen to become legal, how many of you would all of a sudden be using heroin? You'd all become heroin addicts. No, people make decisions, and they make good decisions for the most part. But what I don't like is when the government makes the decision and it violates the principles of liberty. It's a blanket decision and it affects us in everything that we do to the point where you don't even know if you're allowed to drink the milk that you can buy from your neighbor farmer. So when they challenge you and say that and want to paint a negative picture, stick to your guns. Defend liberty. Defend the free choices. Defend our Constitution. Defend states' rights. Regulations, if they're necessary, as they are on alcohol. There's a few regulations in this state in alcohol. So that it's different in different states. But at least there are different states that handle this, and children are generally protected. In alcohol, you know, the kids in high school today can get hold of marijuana easier than they can get hold of alcohol. So it's not like you just turn it loose and dump it out there in the streets and the kids, but ultimately even that doesn't solve the problem. What really solves the problem is good family relationships. Families that teach their kids right and wrong. Now, because of my understanding of the Constitution and economic and moral policy, I have taken a position for as long as I can remember, since I've been in Congress since 1976, so it's nothing new. And that is that I don't like the federal agencies breathing down our neck and regulating our property, even under the guise that they're there to take care of us and help us. So for this reason, I have opposed the federal government's insurance programs because they cause moral hazard. And the one that they quizzed me on today was the insurances that take care of everybody in the midst of a natural disaster. Well, natural disasters are very, very bad, and they're very, very damaging. And I believe that they can be taken care of without the federal government going further into debt, but through this system of liberty and separate governments and state government. Because the point was about flood insurance. I live very near the Gulf Coast. I used to have a house right on the beach. Now, you can't buy private insurance because it's dangerous there, it's too expensive. So what happens? They have to tax you in North Carolina so I can have a beach house in Texas. And then the house gets blown down and the taxpayers pay. But they want to turn that into saying, oh, you don't care about the people suffering from a natural disaster. Well, you know, free markets economics and law really helps us sort these problems out. If you want to build a house on the beach and you love it, yes, buy insurance. Oh, can't buy insurance. Well, that's giving you a very important economic lesson. It's saying it's dangerous to live on the beach. The people that don't live on the beach shouldn't have to pay for those of us who take the risk and live there and get a guarantee from the government. In other ways, our society and our country has been great. We have been very generous when people really get hurt. Not only in this country we go to help people, but around the world. I mean, when there are earthquakes and other things, we as a people have been very, very generous. I'll tell you what, that's going to end because our economic policies in this country is destroying our wealth. We're not going to have any money, hardly take care of ourselves, let alone help the world. I am convinced that if you think things through, that you can figure out how the free market and sound economic policy and sound morality and the Constitution will help us. Does that mean no government? No, the government should be providing a sound currency. They should enforce contracts. They should not be destroying your property rights. They should be protecting your property rights. And obviously, one of the most important property rights that we should always defend is the right to own a weapon to defend ourselves. Questions that have come up this week has to do with foreign policy, and it should be expected because I am so radical that I want to go back to the Constitution and have a foreign policy which is a pro-American foreign policy and not do the things that we're not authorized to do. But because the status quo, including many Republicans in the past, has drifted over to the assumption that we have to be the policemen of the world. Now, I don't think the American people ever fully endorsed that idea because even in recent history, our candidate in the year 2000, he ran on a humble foreign policy, not going into nation building. And of course, that is what I'm running on, but let me tell you, I believe it and we should do it. A lot of people would like to label us who believe in that. Oh, you're a bunch of isolationists. But tell you what, if you believe in freedom of choice, you believe in trading with other people, believing that you have the right to buy goods from anybody you want. It's your money. Why can't you buy the cheap goods? And so you don't have to be an isolationist. It just means that we stay out of the internal affairs and all the conflicts and the civil wars and the religious civil wars, especially going on in the Middle East. I don't believe we have to be involved in that. I think we make more enemies for it, and it is bringing us down financially. And therefore, we need to reassess it and have a new foreign policy. it gets a little trickier because when bad policy brings bad events to ourselves, such as what happened on 9/11, it's very difficult to say, oh, you know, if we wouldn't have had that foreign policy that we had, we wouldn't be under such attack. That you cannot handle that easily because we have been attacked. There are limits. No matter how many mistakes were made in the past, when a country's attacked, a president and a country and a Congress should respond. So for that reason, I did respond by voting for the authority in 2001 to go after the individuals involved and responsible and go and get the Al-Qaeda and gave that authority. But what happened was the authority was abused. Matter of fact, it was abused and ignored. The authority to go after bin Laden was ignored at Tora Bora. Bin Laden was allowed to get off the hook and escape. At the same time, oh, we didn't worry about it too much. We decided, well, maybe they're Al-Qaeda. At least they said, there is Al-Qaeda. There are nuclear weapons aimed at us. So we have to go in and fight this war in Iraq. So what do we end up with? 10 years. 10 years of thousands of our people being killed. Tens of thousands having been wounded with serious injuries. Believe me, there's information coming out now that the Persian Gulf War syndrome with the first Persian Gulf War, which took a long time to acknowledge, is going to have massive number of people, you know, with those conditions coming back. Head injuries. We have a big, big problem on our hands, and that's a cost. Trillions of dollars, thousands of lives, casualties that we have, and to go after a group of people who deserve to be going after, but the cost, as far as I'm concerned, was way too high. Though I supported that authority, I had deep reservations with fear that it was being misused, and therefore I was looking around for another option, and that is when I reviewed what I've learned about the Constitution, and they have a provision in the Constitution that maybe we can have a narrow defined war. Since we can't declare war against the government when it's a band of criminals that are attacking us, that is when they provided the principle of a letter of marque and reprisal. And that is target the enemy, go after them, and get them. Now, the good example of how this might work is what Ross Perot did. When he had some of his employees taken into hostage in Iran, he didn't go to the federal government and say, go in, attack them, declare war. What he did, he got some special forces, retiree, he got his people in there, he went in and got them out and brought them out. Now, if this principle had been ingrained in our system and we had used it, we could have well paid $500 million or $1 billion to capture the individuals that were responsible, and yet, of course, we didn't do that. That would have been cheap compared to the trillions of dollars that we're involved in now. Not only do I see some of that as a conflict in not doing well, every time we occupy our country, every time we kill a civilian, and it continues, when we lob these bombs into Pakistan, civilians get killed too. They get angry at us. What would we do if that happened? And they say, well, there's maybe Taliban in there, we have to go get them. The Taliban is not the Al-Qaeda. The Taliban are a group of people who are very determined that they don't want any foreign occupation. That's their religious and political belief. And we joined them when they were so annoyed with the Soviets occupying Afghanistan, but we were on the side of those who said no occupation. So it should be so unusual for us to come to the conclusion that if we're involved over there, that they wouldn't turn on us, and that certainly is what happened. But if you want to demonstrate the futility of our foreign policy, just think about Pakistan. We're lobbing bombs into Pakistan. Innocent people are getting killed. Maybe a Taliban member is killed who's only arguing that he wants his country back. And at the same time, we give them billions of dollars. I mean, we give them money. I used to say that, you know, our problem in this country is we have only two foreign policies. One, if they do what we tell them, we give them money. If they don't do what we tell them, we bomb them. In this case, we're doing both.